The arrival of Ganyu has definitely changed expectations of many, and there's a certain importance about her that needs to be addressed in this video. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by Dynasty Scrolls, a new strategy hero collector game that features you as the main protagonist who time travels into the ancient era of Three Kingdoms. In order for you to return to your own world, you must defeat the big bad boss by fighting all of these powerful scrolls throughout the kingdom. On your journey to do this, collect characters based on real life people and experience a story full of humor and mysteries. Your support means everything to us, so make sure to click on the download link below the video and check out Dynasty Scrolls today to start playing now. Since the launch of Genshin Impact, we have seen plenty of characters show up in the wishing system, and even some of them became permanent residents of the standard wish banner, although there was only 4-star characters Diona and Xinyan. So when the news first hit that we won't be getting new 4-star characters in 1.2 update, there were some concerns raised by the players, and it was one of the first contributing factors that led to certain expectations about Ganyu. And if we actually take a look at the timeline of character releases, the first one was Venti during the launch of the game, where if you listen closely and believed in his potential, he would be the ultimate endgame character that helps deal with many problems by throwing them into a massive vortex. So starting strong with an insane character from the beginning gave an understanding to some that it might be like this all the time, and even if Venti didn't have the traditional role of being either a support or main damage dealer, the amount of power he gives to the players by letting you control your enemies was truly bizarre. Then came Klee, and even if she had a clunky playstyle, there was no doubt that she was one of the top damage dealers just because of how heavily favored Pyro was by the Spiral Abyss, and at the time, building her was still pretty hard because everyone was busy leveling their adventure ranks. And when the news of our initial major update arrived, Child was the first one to introduce himself in 1.1, and while he was certainly the favorite of many, the looming shadow that Zhongli cast on him was fast approaching, and the hype surrounding him was record-breaking. So when the Geo Archon finally showed up, the expectations, just like with Ganyu, were totally different, and this caused one of the biggest and interesting events outside the game, where a lot of people started to voice their opinion about the way Zhongli works, and were asking for the developers to do something about it. And it's interesting to know that while this is mostly a single-player experience, the emotional attachment people develop with their characters is an absolutely normal thing in this day and age, especially because gacha games in particular are favored by what's known as fantasy players, who hold the highest buying power when it comes to exclusive characters, and this is a study that was done by Google themselves. Still, within a relatively short time, MiHoYo addressed the fact Zhongli will be getting buffed in 1.3 update, but what follows was Albedo, who was another Geo character, and there was some skepticism in the community, especially of how different Geo gameplay feels, and so while everyone's expectations have shifted, it was a welcome surprise to see that Albedo was actually a very good damage support character. But finally, this is where Ganyu gets introduced into the picture. Anyone who has followed all of these character releases before Ganyu have certainly formed a specific opinion, and even when we saw in the trailers that she had a special charge shot, there was still doubt she could actually be a main damage dealer, and instead was approached with the expectations that were influenced by other character releases. But it appears that after the dust has settled, Ganyu is actually an insanely powerful main damage dealer, not to mention she can provide competent support for the team, and to examine this, we need to go to the second part. Going back to the basics, the two most important things about her is her base attack, which is in parallel to Deluxe, and the ascension bonus she gets for her critical damage that ends up adding exactly 34.8% when she's fully leveled. That's basically what you get from a single substat if you roll every time on critical damage. And aside from these powerful base stats you get, her biggest selling point as her main damage dealer is her charge shot, and every time you level this talent, you add a big chunk of percentage of an already powerful bloom damage effect you get. Now pair this together with either Wanderer's Troop or Hydro Artifact set, and she can capitalize on this powerful shot even more. And to add on top of that, there's also Amos Bow that's been available since the release, and it was at one point called by some players the worst 5-star weapon in the game, which now has ended up being an excellent weapon for Ganyu. But to make things even better, she can even obtain a very good bow from the blacksmith, which is the prototype Crescent, and if you're someone who just reached adventure rank 45, ready to build your first serious character, all you need to do is basically get the bow from the blacksmith if you don't have any other ones from the gacha, and then farm out the Dragon Spine domain if you don't have the decent Wanderer's Troop artifacts, so you can substitute it for the Hydro set instead. And that's just the way her role and progression works as your main damage dealer, but what about her as your support? Her burst can be kept on the battlefield indefinitely, since it has 15-second cooldown and it also lasts the same amount of time, not to mention it covers a massive area, so you can easily hit nearly every enemy that's close to you. This area is more wide than Zhongli's Resonance from Pillar and Amber's Burst combined, and you can even get a decent amount of invincibility frames as you can immediately switch to her if you're just about to get damaged heavily. Let's not forget her elemental skill, which can divert the monster's attention and even inflict pretty decent damage, especially if the targets have pyro status on them. So it's almost like she's in a league of her own, and the best way to showcase that would be to put her into an actual team. But before we continue, here's some team building tips you can use in our today's sponsor, Dynasty Scrolls. Now, one of the coolest things in Dynasty Scrolls are the combo attacks. While your heroes are busy beating up their enemies down, you can activate these powerful combo cards by using up the energy you accumulate and then unleashing this strategic move upon your unsuspecting foes. And what's awesome about these combos is that there are so many of them and each feature a gorgeous looking animation. For example, if your enemy has very high defense, you can use Phoenix combo, which melts away their armor and completely ignores it, dealing crazy amounts of damage. Then there's Stampede, which helps deal with annoying enemies by stunning them and shutting them down for a brief period of time. And if you're ever feeling like you're about to lose, you can use the Max Chillax to recover your team's health. And the best part about this is that you can actually use up to 4 of these combos during battles, so you can mix and match them to your own liking, not to mention there's a ton of different combos to unlock and explore. And you can also power up these combos by getting special runes or increasing their rank, so if you have a combo you like in particular, you can absolutely make it even more powerful. Just look at those damage numbers coming from Phoenix combo, and there's no better way to utilize these combos than by participating in many of the game modes Dynasty Scrolls offers. You can go through story mode where you can collect the scrolls of power to increase your overall stats, and there's also side stories that feature famous warlords and real life people of the 3 kingdoms, so you can learn about them and also unlock powerful upgrades in the process. Then there's also arena mode where you can fight other players, and what's really fun about it is that you can climb the ranks very fast by only defeating the strongest opponents first. Of course, in order to beat these missions or other players, you will need a team of heroes which you can summon to your aid. There are 4 factions in the game, and our favorite one are the warlords, which specialize in poisoning their enemies and have large area attacks. And heroes have affinities to each other, so deploying them together can give you massive bonuses like extra attack or health. Equipping a strong weapon like the ruinous warpike can also dramatically increase your damage, especially because this hero has a skill that can damage and stun more than one enemy. So by using combos, equipment and skills, you have discovered many strategies, and now you can use them to your advantage against enemies and other players. So back when we compared Ganyu to Diluc, one thing that separates them is that there's rarely ever the need to have Diluc as your support, and the actual question you need to ask yourself, who's willing to be the support for Diluc instead? And this comparison between the two is the easiest to make because of their close association to Melt and Vaporize, which lets them fully utilize, even if Ganyu gets lesser multiplier, but even then, her damage output with the reaction is pretty insane compared to Diluc, who really prefers to have the elemental reactions at hand, especially because he's primarily built with the full Crimson Witch artifact set. And not only is she flexible performing either of the roles, but she also belongs to the cryo element, which allows you to exploit various team compositions, and the 2 most powerful ones that came out on top if you're using her as your main damage dealer are the Melt and Freeze combos. And these teams she leads can either destroy your enemies very quickly or keep them in one place without too much effort, thanks to characters like Xingqiu or Mona. So with everything already mentioned, it should be clear by now that praising her won't bring constructive feedback anymore, and the more critical part we need to identify is why she is so good, and does it have anything to do with the past events regarding other character releases, and what exactly this means for the future of wishing these new characters. We often get wrapped into these specifics that we forget this is still a gacha game, and the main attraction will always be the new characters, but in the case of Genshin Impact, the open world exploration and the ability to play this game on PC has brought a large player base into the mix, and after excluding Klee, this is the first serious female character that had already established fandom before her arrival, so it's only natural there will be a lot of expectations, emotions, and simply put, power involved. And it's always nice to analyze the abilities of the character, but we must not forget that it's still a game that's about story, exploration, new events, and even if Ganyu currently is very powerful and capable character, you could be wishing for different reasons, and one of them that remain relevant in YouTube community are the evaluations of the viability of the character. And now that we have seen a powerful character can get released just like that, it poses the question if we can always expect to see the same results or will it be different every time. This is something that's obviously impossible to answer, and the better way to view this, if you're concerned with the character's power level, would be to identify if they have what's called a gimmick. You've probably noticed that Child and Ganyu both rely on the certain gimmick to unleash their devastating attacks as your main damage dealer, and this means if we see in character previews something that's not usual, we should take a mental note this will most likely be their main source of damage, since these things usually happen for a reason, and it's common practice in game design. And even if Ganyu's charge shot can be hard to use on mobile devices or for the players who struggle with aiming, the white explosion area the Frostflake arrow produces has a pretty big error margin. And as always, it's best first to wait until the initial review reviews arrive before making the final call on the character, and even sometimes it can take longer because discovering potential isn't always instant. Either way, Ganyu proves that after Zhongli and Albedo, our first serious main damage dealer has finally arrived, and with the exciting future looking upon us, this is definitely not going to be the last time someone as powerful as her will show up, and it's exciting to see what other gimmicks MiHoYo will introduce with new characters. Of course, there's no greater power than emotional attachment, and someone like Xinyan, who isn't exactly most favorite of them all, is still warmly welcomed in this party of ours. Thanks again to Dynasty Scrolls for sponsoring this video, and if you haven't done already, we highly encourage you to check out this awesome hero collector game that is not only full of funny moments, but also offers a lot of satisfying strategy and gameplay. So be sure to lend us your support and help out the channel by checking out Dynasty Scrolls and clicking on the link below the video to download the game. You can also use the in-game code JOINUS to receive a lot of extra goodies that will help you start strong early. And you can get the latest news about the game by following the official Dynasty Scrolls social media, which you will find inside the video's description. So help support us today by clicking on the link below the video and checking out Dynasty Scrolls.